Welcome to the Vantage HR Influencers Podcast. This podcast is sponsored by Vantage Circle, the leading employee benefits and engagement platform.
We all face conflict at work, and dealing with conflict is a crucial skill to succeed. It can be your coworker who keeps going over your head for more benefits, or it may be your manager who took all the credits for your initiative. Sometimes we decide to have the difficult conversation, and sometimes we just shy away. So we know that getting everyone on the same page is difficult, and it is far more challenging when it comes to the remote working structure. Hello everyone, this is Shushmita from Vantage HR Influencer Podcast, and today we'll have a conversation on the topic conflict management in the remote working structure. Introducing our guest speaker today, Mr. Vinay Trivedi, who is a head HR at Tech with 14 years of experience in the field of talent management, talent engagement, talent acquisition, banking, insurance, and fintech sector. Welcome to the show, Vinay.
Thank you very much for having me here. And let me also tell you that this is my first podcast. So
Great.
Very glad to partner with you and share some insights.
Okay. So before we start, Vinay, we would love to know a little more about you and your journey in HR.
I've had a very, very interesting journey as far as my HR career is concerned. I say it's interesting because I've actually tried 4-5 different types of industries. I've worked across information technology services, BPO, banking, life insurance, and now I'm in a startup ecosystem. So my journey in that sense has been very, very exciting, has been very, very linear, and has been adventurous. I've failed many times. I have fallen flat many times, and I've had a lot of conflicts, and I've still sort of progressed, and I kept going.
Okay. So coming to the topic, Vinay, how would you describe the term conflict management?
See, in my view, conflict, and let's understand what conflict really means. And then the management of it can sort of come in.
Right.
Conflict is sometimes to do with making a choice between two rights or making a choice between two people that you believe in. And conflicts also are internal. When I say internal, it's more of conflict between the left and the right side of our own self, of what do we want to do and what do we not want to do. So conflict really is to make that difficult choice, and management is to try and see how that choice that we make is in the larger good of, in this context, an organization, or it could be anything else that you are actually deciding for.
Right. So conflicts are common in any team, but it needs to be handled a little more differently, a little more carefully when it comes to the remote teams. Why is it that disagreements among virtual teams can escalate more quickly than in face-to-face encounters?
This is a very, very interesting question that you actually asked. When you are in a normal scenario, and if there are conflicts, there are ways and means to diffuse those conflicts or to reduce those conflicts, because you are present together in a particular location.
Right.
When it comes to virtual teams, you do not get that time to diffuse. I'll give you an example. There's a heated argument that happens in a team meeting. There is conflict of views and opinions, and there is a certain decision that gets taken, which obviously may not be agreeable to everybody in that team. But when the 2 or 3 people who are disgruntled or angry post the meeting, there is somebody who will reach out to them and have a conversation to diffuse that tension. Virtually, that may not be possible in the same intensity, because you have to either do a telecon or you have to do a video conference. So conflicts virtually are to be managed in a very, very time sensitive manner. And I say time sensitive because it's very critical that you address it as soon as you can when it comes to virtual teams. And The only reason why it escalates very quickly is because there's nobody who can come to you and tell you, hey, hang on, don't worry, I have a different view and I'll explain that to you. Let us get done with this, because you're all virtual. So it has to be treated very, very sensitively, and more importantly, time sensitively. So the timing of how we diffuse it is more important.
Hmm. So, what are the most common conflicts that we can see in remote workplaces?
So remote workplaces actually, the normal conflicts that happen, which could be difference of opinion, difference of strategy, difference of approach in trying to get a solution to a problem. These are your normal conflicts that happen at workplaces when you approach any situation or a solution. When you're virtually working, the compounded element of that is also that people are not able to very clearly read your non-verbal communication. When you're sitting in a team meeting, somebody may nod their head and still say, I agree. And you know that the person is not comfortable. So you may ask, hey, what's the matter? You don't seem convinced. But virtually, that may not be 100% possible. So another layer to these common conflicts is the non-verbal communication bit, which also is often in a conflict scenario. That's one. The second one, when you look at remote workplaces, is appreciation of complexity. When I say appreciation of complexity, not everybody, we're human beings, and we are social beings. We are tuned to meet people and talk to them, physical, feel and touch. Now, virtually, that may be adding to the stress that will lead conflict, because you're not in physical presence in any of these conversations. So what it does is it makes you that much more hypersensitive in your approach. And there is also FOMO, if you understand, fear of missing out. Because you're not together, you may be thinking, what are the other two people thinking after this call? Right. But had you been in an office location, that would have been a normal scenario. You're seeing what is happening around you. So it may not be true, but it may be a conflict point where we are constantly thinking, what is happening on the other side? Are they also on the same track? Are they thinking differently? We don't know. So that invisible parameter can add to a conflict scenario. So these are two different types of conflicts apart from the normal, conflicts that happen. Is reality in the virtual world.
So, is it true that HR should not be involved in every conflict, because then they become the police station at the company?
So, HR, HR are also police. They're also principal of a college. They're also friends. They're also philosophers. They're also guides. HR is basically one bag that you can keep punching on, and not expect retaliation, or not expect any kind of issue arising out of that punching. Right? As HR, we are that sponge. We keep absorbing a lot of these things.
Right.
I think, in my personal opinion, and also in my professional journey, HR should only get involved in conflicts if there is a HR issue. HR should not get involved in conflicts if it is a business issue. Now, you may ask me, but how are they different? I mean, ultimately, it's all dealing with people. A business issue is there is a project that you have to run, and for that project, there are different ideas that are coming up, and there will be conflicts in the way those ideas are getting shaped up. And there is one idea that ultimately will have to be chosen over the other idea. HR cannot get involved in that process and say that no, but you should look at the project like this, or you should look at the project like that. That is not a conflict that HR should be involved in. When I say HR conflict, if there is something that becomes disrespectful in that whole bargain, if the conflict turns ugly into a fight where people are abusing each other, that becomes an HR issue. So you're not really telling them how the project should be run, but you're possibly telling them how you should behave when you are in those conflict moments. So they should consciously separate themselves from all business issues, and they should only be involved in HR issues. That's the way I would look at HR's involvement in a conflict scenario.
Yeah. But we see that most of the times when employees are disappointed, they tend to say that, okay, if you can't resolve this issue, then I'm going to the HR. So that comes as a treat to many managers, I suppose. So is it like before involving the HR's, managers should exhaust their own strategies to resolve any conflict?
See, HR and manager are not two different people, by the way. Manager is the first HR. That you always have, even in defense, right? There is a first line of defense, which is your soldier level. Then there's a second layer of defense. Then there's a third layer of defense. If you look at a chess as a game, right? You have soldiers as the first line of defense, and then you have all your other pawns behind, right? So the manager in this context will be the first line of defense, as in he or she will be the first HR who is solving the problem in two ways. So somebody comes disgruntled to the manager saying, boss, what is happening? This guy is just treating me like this. This is not the way it happens, etc., etc. The manager will separate two issues. You're angry with him, or you're angry that your idea is not getting passed. If you're angry that your idea is not getting passed, let me tell you why your idea is not getting passed. If you're angry that he is responsible for this, then you have to separate your personal bias and look at it. Now, that's an HR's work that a manager does. So it's never a threat. In fact, HR is the first, so manager is the first HR before somebody comes to us for conflict resolution. Does it make sense to you?
Right,
it gives you a perspective?
Yeah, right.
Sure.
Okay. So what are the top conflict management practices that you would like us to know and learn, especially considering the remote working structure?
So I think there are two things that clearly work very well in a remote working structure. The first thing that works and that all organizations should adopt to is over communication of what is happening and progress reports. When I say over communication, when you're in an office environment, you're walking past somebody, you take an update. You generally, go to different meetings, you get an update. Everybody is around you, so you keep getting your updates, or you keep getting inputs and information. When you're working remotely, that chain is broken. You are only walking from your room to your kitchen and coming back, so you're not meeting anybody in between, right? So over communication as a policy, where the leadership team, the managers, on a weekly basis, they update what is happening around the company, not just in their department, because in their department they'll be anyways up to date with whatever is happening. But overall, what is happening, you need to keep sending those updates. You need to keep telling people what, where are we, what are we doing. What it does is it gives them a reassurance in their head that, yeah, I'm also in it. It appears that I'm also still involved. I know what is happening in marketing. I know what is happening in sales. I know what is happening in tech. I know what is happening in finance, because you are getting those overall updates. So I think over communication as a strategy to reduce the conflicts that may keep coming up in people's minds is an important step to be taken. Second step that needs to be taken is transparency. I think people think that when they work virtually, transparency gets impacted the most, because it's a look and feel, right? You're suddenly not looking at your laptop, but imagine you're working on a laptop without looking at that. Like an invisible laptop or an invisible keyboard where you just type assuming, right? It just makes you feel so, the thought of it itself makes you feel so uncomfortable. So I think transparency in the approach. So whenever communication happens, to transparently also tell what is not happening, where are we, how are we doing, what is the issue. It really gives that confidence and gives that, or builds that trust. The minute that trust is built, conflicts will reduce from arising. Now, why do I say this? When I'm constantly worried, if somebody calls up and says, do you know that guy also was trying to do this? It just plants a seed in my head, and I'm again looking at it from a conflict perspective, right? But if I have transparent communication, and if I have over communication, as in daily, weekly updates coming in, I will tell that guy, what are you talking? I know this. This was already spoken about in the last meeting, right? It reduces the rumor mongering initiated conflicts. So transparency and over communication are two critical weapons that people have to use while they're communicating or managing virtual teams.
Yeah. So is it like there's a huge scope of judgmental bias in remote workplace conflict management? That can
Judgmental
lead to
bias.
many conflicts.
So judgmental bias has nothing to do with virtual working or physical working. Judgmental bias is to do with one's own assumptions in the head, right? And how do you reduce a judgmental bias, or how do you sort of not let those judgmental biases create an impact on you? Is by continuously communicating. It's like, when people keep hammering in your head, this is what it is, this is what it is, this is what it is, you'll stop judging because you'll believe whatever communication is coming, right? And when people are transparent, hey, we are doing these 8 things very well, these 2 things we have still not, we're still not addressed, and therefore you may have some inconvenience. Please bear with us till such time, right? It reduces your conflicts arising out of you making judgments. What we need to understand here is, in any conflict situation, the approach or medicine or prescription to managing conflicts is not, how to put across, these are supportive medicines. These are not curable medicines, right? When I say supportive, it only reduces the level of conflicts. It doesn't end it. You will still continue to have some or the other conflict. You address one thing, somebody else will bring something else, right? You look at how you reduce it. You can never say, I will eliminate conflicts from my organization, right? So judgmental bias also in a similar manner, through your tools that you use to gain trust of your employees, which is over communication, transparency, giving regular updates, talking to people, will only help reduce that bias.
Okay. So how do you re-engage an employee after a conflict has taken place?
So we particularly use an approach which is distance, diffuse, and direct. So if there is a conflict, we immediately, and we realize that there's a conflict that is going out of control, or there's a conflict that can grow into a bigger problem, we immediately look at distancing from that conflict, as in every party that is involved distances. Once you distance from that particular, because in the heat of the moment a lot of things happen, right? So when you distance yourself from that, it diffuses for a while. The minute you let it cool down, and that now people will be in some frame of mind which is cooler than what it was, you immediately look at engaging and talking to them, and sort of giving an explanation to them through a directive. That's why we say distance, diffuse, and direction, where first thing is we distance, second thing is we wait for it to diffuse, and then we give a direction on what needs to be done. And that really works. Whenever there's a conflict, there's no point in jumping into it to solve. I mean, you don't have to, douse all fire, because sometimes you will not realize what you're using to douse that fire may not be water but kerosene, which may only, increase the intensity of the fire. Therefore, distancing and diffusing is important.
Right. So according to you, what are the most important steps that remote managers can take to avoid future conflicts?
So I think if you sort of ask me, remote managers or managers in general, okay, for them, conflicts are a sign that the team is progressive and the team is growing. Okay, conflicts are never bad. Not addressing conflicts is what is a bigger issue. Okay, sometimes people don't want conflicts in their team at all. When you do not have conflicts, you don't grow. You don't sort of progress, because everybody's saying yes to whatever you're saying. Where is the growth coming in? How is it that you sort of outgrow whatever you have done? So conflicts are good.
Mostly it's like when diverse ideas come in, conflicts occur, right?
conflicts. Yeah. So the fact that diverse ideas are coming in, that means you're growing.
Yeah, right.
And that will only happen when there is conflicts,
Mm-hmm.
right? Friction. Like, for example, in Stone Age, when there was friction that was created between two stones, that's how fire came out, right? The spark. That's how they could
Right.
fire. It in a smooth manner, nothing will happen. So what my advice to the managers is that you should allow healthy conflicts. If there is no conflict, then that means that your team is not telling you something, and therefore it's critical to have those conflicts. What you need to also do is, as a manager, recognize when will a conflict turn into a major issue, and that point has to be remembered for them to use the uh, use the approach that I just mentioned, distance,
Right.
diffuse, and direction, where they can sort of control those conflicts.
So, based on your studies and research, would you like to suggest some good books or courses on conflict management to our listeners?
I think it's not really a conflict management book, but this book is a very important book to build leadership character. And conflict is just one part of what you manage as a leader. It is called Strengths-Based Leadership, which is written by Tom Ruth and Barry Conchie. This book really talks about how are great leaders made, how are great teams made, and why people follow those great leaders and why people follow those great teams. And conflict resolution is a very critical parameter of this particular book. So I think people should read this book, Strengths Based Leadership by Tom Ruth and Barry Conchie.
Okay. Well, that was a great session with you, Vinay, and there's a lot more to learn actually. So please tell us the best way our listeners can reach out to you.
LinkedIn is a platform that I would prefer. They can look up for Vinay Trivedi on LinkedIn. I'm sure they'll find me. I also have a channel by the name VT Talks, which is Vinay Trivedi Talks. This channel essentially has short 6-7 minute videos that helps a lot of people work on building their career. So it could be tips on building their profile, tips on building their interview skills, tips on conflict management, multiple videos. So they can look up for VT Talks on YouTube and listen into the videos as well.
Okay. Thank you so much for all your valuable inputs, and thanks for joining, Vinay.
Thank you very much, Sushmita, for this great conversation and giving me my first podcast. This is going to be memorable because the first is always memorable. Thank you very much.
Thank you
for inviting me.
Yeah.
Thanks for listening to Vantage HR Influencers Podcast. Please do subscribe to Vantage HR Influencers Podcast on Apple Podcasts and Spotify for new episodes.